So here we have the three knights going their separate ways, Gawain and Marhaus and Uwaine, and each one of them has their own little adventure. And Gawain, the first of the three, as told by Mallory, has a sort of misadventure. He's a bit of a comic character here in an awful unchivalrous kind of way. He has encountered this character of Peleus and his lady Ettarde, and it says that Peleus is dying for love for Ettarde. He will have her love or he'll die. And Ettarde, on the other hand, is very proud and will have none of him. She wants something better, I suppose. So the proud lady and the devoted knight. And Peleus is willing to even go to jail just to get a glimpse of Ettarde. That's how devoted he is to her. Again, a common theme in a lot of medieval works is the knight who devotes himself night and day to the lady and will die for her, etc., etc., etc. And Gawain, who steps into the midst of this I think a very basic, very human connection, man and woman seeking each other. He steps into the middle of it and says, I'll help you out, Peleus. I'll help you out, and I will go and woo the lady for you. And Peleus says, don't betray me in this. Please don't betray me in this, because this is my whole life is devoted to this woman. But Gawain says, no, give me your horse and give me your armor, and I'll pretend like I killed you, and I'll go and woo her, and she'll fall in love with me, and then you can reveal yourself as alive, and she'll love you, etc., etc., etc. Which to the reader seems like a pretty cockamamie plan. I mean, the whole thing from the very beginning seems a little odd. It is a common theme for the emissary to woo the lady, but in this case, the whole thing seems a little bit strange. And what we find is that it goes bad very quickly, because Gawain goes and he sees Lady Ettarde and he says, I've killed your man, Peleus, and she's all distraught. And so he comforts her. And he goes further than that by jumping in the bed with her. And the two of them end up as lovers. And here he is in bed with the woman that he is supposed to be wooing for Peleus. He goes over and above the call of duty in accomplishing his task. And he falls asleep, and Peleus walks in on them, finds them there in bed. You said you were going to help me. How is this supposed to help me, says Peleus. And he gets a little irate, and he runs out of the room. And then she wakes up, and she says, you betrayed us both, because you said you killed him, and now I'm destroyed, and he's destroyed, and how dare you do that? And so Gawain is kind of driven out, being persona non grata from both the woman and the man that he was trying to help. It's a bit on the comic side, except for that Gawain, of course, has ruined these people's lives, and so he comes back shamefaced from his misadventure. We go then in the story to the other two, and we see that the other two have gone through their own adventures. Marhaus has, for instance, defeated a family, sons and their father, and then also has defeated a giant. And then Uwaine, who wins at the tournament and saves a lady. And so the three of them come back at the end of the story, and they meet again after their adventures. The whole section that we're reading then is in a way a triune image that we've seen before. That same triune image that we saw in the connection between Gawain and Ettarde and Peleus, and the same triune image that we saw in Uther Pendragon and the Duke of Tintagel and his wife, and the same triune convention we've seen elsewhere. It seems to be an image that crops up frequently in Mallory, is this image of three, this triune image. We see it later with Lancelot and with Arthur and with Guinevere. Also notice that this little adventure is itself a smaller form of the much greater adventure that's going to occur later, which is the adventure of the Grail quest. And as far as that goes, the Grail quest then is accomplished eventually by three characters. And the search for the Grail is in some ways a search for perfection, ideal perfection. That image of the Grail, or the Grail cup, is something which is traditionally associated with femininity, with womanhood. We see this as far back as the work of Beowulf, or even earlier. In Beowulf, for instance, the woman who is supposed to bring peace and harmony and love and warmth to the society goes about with a Grail cup. And in this text, Mallory associates that feminine power, that feminine force, which cools and brings life to the court. he associates it also with the character of Christ, the image of salvation, suggesting perhaps, Mallory seems to suggest, that femininity is a way of saving society, of man finding salvation in woman. If that's the case, this is almost like an inverse Grail quest. It's almost as though Gawain, who messes up so badly in the Grail quest, is a guy who fails at finding what the real meaning of femininity and sexuality and honor are all about. It's as though he mistakes the immediate attraction and the immediate acquisition of physical love, mistakes that for something that he ought to be doing instead. Gawain, though, is remember, a reduplication of Arthur. So we get something of Arthur's mistaking the feminine power, mistaking the draw of sexuality in the character of Gawain. Remember, with Arthur, he mistakes this frequently. He does this with his aunt when he actually conceives a child with his own aunt. We see that when he goes and marries Guinevere, when he's told not to do so. This impetuous, uncontrolled desire for love and acceptance that causes Arthur to make mistakes is in some ways the same thing that causes Gawain to make mistakes. Now, what we see in this comic inverse Grail quest is later played out as a tragedy in the later part of the work. It's as though the author here is foreshadowing the thing that's going to happen further on in the text. And again, he does this frequently, where these images come up earlier and they are then repeated in larger and larger forms later in the text. Almost like dream imagery, for instance, where the dream will show us one thing in one way and then another in the same thing in another way. Well, by the end of the story, the three of them gather by the fountain again, and they tell each other their stories. And notice with the fountain, we get yet another image of the Grail. The fountain which has the water coming out of it is another Grail image. And one has to ask, what exactly is it that Gawain missed? What is it that Marhaus and Uwaine seem to have gotten? Because just as in the later quest, Galahad is going to win, Gawain fails. And just as the other two knights seem to fail, these two knights here, Marhaus and Uwaine, seem to succeed. It's an interesting flip of what we'll see later in the text.